With every film, if you have something to say, the big challenge is that the story is not overshadowed by the message.
So Stav, by an amazing coincidence, I'm actually in Cyprus to interview directly, because we had the Get It Made competition, you decided to submit, and I'm actually was going to come to the Cyprus Film Days, and turns out you won. So now we get to actually do this in person.
I think it's the perfect example of what's called movie magic, Bernhard. And what did you think? What did you think of Cyprus?
I mean, Cyprus is awesome. Like, it's technically my second time here, but the first time was so brief, I didn't really get to see much of it. So seeing Limassols, being part of the Cyprus Film Days, being part of Data Map was, of course, awesome. I just want to congratulate you again for writing The Attendant. It was a pleasure to read, and I finally got to read it after the winning script. I abstained from reading anything beforehand. I just want to sort of know from you where the idea for The Attendant came from, and how you got to actually writing it down.
So, thanks. First of all, thank you, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who read it at the beginning, UK at the UK Film Festival, and everyone who voted. It was really like
We had 300 submissions.
Yeah, that's you write something and you're not thinking about winning, and this is why I also want to say thank you to you for actually starting this competition, because it's so nice to have an opportunity just to think about something new. We're always stuck in development with like one thing or another, and it takes years and years and years and years, and then just to have a reason to sit down and kind of think about something new is amazing. So thanks for that. And thanks for the opportunity to actually get this made. Now, it's been a really tough couple of years for everybody, and I think the last thing the world needed after this pandemic and all these signs around us of global warming and environmental change and impending environmental catastrophes was a war, and a war in which suddenly there's the threat of nuclear kind of destruction, and you're sitting there on TV, kind of watching on TV, like people losing their houses, like losing their lives from one day to the next, and you're thinking, oh my God, this could be us. This could be the whole world at any given moment. So I went through this period of great anxiety just as you were kind of launching this competition, and then we were going for a 3-day vacation to see friends in Belgium, and I was sitting next to my wife and my kid, and I literally had this moment of sheer panic about the world, the future of this kid, the future of this whatever, and it reminded me of a very old idea that I had about the possibility of a whole bunch of humans staying inside this nuclear fallout shelter for over 10,000 years, which was supposed to be set 10,000 years in the future, and it was kind of an examination of what humanity would be like 10,000 years, after being enclosed in a space for 10,000 years, with all the genetic, linguistic, ritualistic, religious kind of, consequences of that. But then I thought, I'm not one of those people. I'm one of those people who's needs to figure out if the world ended tomorrow, where to put this family, So in this kind of sheer, spur, I guess, I hope you're editing this burst of kind of ideas, and it kind of came forth. And by the time we landed, I just kind of wrote it on my iPad, and by the time we landed, it kind of took shape. This idea of this guy who's has this one opportunity to sacrifice himself, but kind of, at least for now, guarantee his family's survival. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds intense. We've known each other for a few years, but I've always known that you take sort of world events very personally. But this sort of direct, sort of emotional thing sounds very, I don't know, like draining in a way.
Yeah, I guess this has a lot to do with my whole modus of work. Growing up in Cyprus, which is like, a divided nation, growing up in a divided capital, politics has always been part of how I experience life in a way, like things happen an ocean away, like a government falls or government rises, and you're thinking, how does that affect negotiations to solve Cyprus problem, so you're very kind of attuned to the world in a way. And you feel like it does affect you somehow, even though it probably doesn't, because like geopolitics is geopolitics and it very rarely changes. But ever since I started, being aware of the world, things that happen in the world make me either angry or upset. Usually, very few things make me happy on a global scale, and that anger has always been like my primal creative drive. That anxiety. It's always been the first thing that kind of drives me to new ideas. Whether it's like some kind of heavy metal musical about like the eternal conflict, or like some chamber piece about like a guy who has PTSD. Like it always is born from a reaction to something that's happening,
right.
In the broader world. And then the challenge is, how do you make that actually personal or yours? And then, that's where development comes in.
And then turned into a narrative, right? So
Exactly.
I have to say, from our perspective, when we created the 3-minute script competition, our idea behind that was, well, chances are if it's 3 minutes, it's probably a person in a room, maybe a couple of people in a room, or something relatively small. And we were looking at doing something that's achievable and doable. And here you show up with a sci-fi epic with protests and a storm chamber and like a petrol station in the desert, which is pure Americana. We're like, right, this is, and then of course everybody loves that. So
yeah, sorry about that.
So now we're looking at our budget, going, okay, how are we going to do this then? But I know we've had some conversations of how to pull this off, and thankfully, the Cyprus Film Days and the Center Frame Network, as we have it right now, has actually already been helpful in trying to get us some ideas on how to pull this off with the limited resources that we have, which is really cool. And I'm actually really excited to sort of get moving on the project and see how we can actually realize this.
I can't wait, to work together to make this happen.
Yeah.
And even writing it, I was like, there's certain things we're gonna have to take, very creative producing decisions, to pull off. But like I feel like if as you said, like kind of tapping into the network, and also like just putting our heads together, and even working within like certain constraints and limitations, sometimes that can really improve a project, because if you know what your limits are, you have to find that creative way around certain issues. But like I said at the beginning, of course when I submitted the project, I was like, this has to be filmable. But literally the idea of like just having to submit something new somewhere, like the most important thing was just being able to express something new and express how I felt in that moment, which is again why I think I'm so grateful, and I think everyone who kind of submits to these things is really grateful for just the idea of like, hey, what new idea can I come up with and like that like works for this. So
what would you sort of describe as the biggest challenge of writing something that's 3 pages long? Like if you had to narrow it down to something, what would you call it?
Like with every film, if you have something to say, the big challenge is that the story is not overshadowed by the message or the point. And the shorter the script, the bigger the point. Because like if you've got 3 pages, you're definitely trying to deliver some kind of message, and the biggest challenge is to even in those 3 pages to have enough space, to give yourself enough space to have a character, to establish a need, a want, to establish an obstacle or a course of action. And it was a brilliant exercise in actually thinking in economical terms. Like when you first announced this 3-minute competition, it took me a really long time to even come up with something precisely because I was like, you know, what can one do in 3 minutes?
Exactly.
It's not going to be like, you know, a public service announcement or a really kind of political message or, you know, like a one-shot portrait of a face, like, you know, waking up, you know, or blinking or whatever. So, you know, it's the challenge from 3 to 300. It's like always this, like what you're trying to say versus like how you're saying it is always, you know, a balance. But in 3 minutes, that was definitely the biggest thing. And I had, in submitting this, when starting to write this, I had the last shot first.
Right.
That last moment, you know, with him lighting a cigarette and the reflection of the television of like, you know, how the rest of the world is facing the end of the world. Now he's facing it. And then it kind of worked back. And I think if I hadn't had that and known that I could arrive at that moment in 3 minutes, I probably would not even have tried. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's the point. Yeah, I mean, that is, you basically have, I mean, Petros summarized it fairly well. So you basically have a first act, second act, and punchline, and the punchline is your third act. You know what I mean? Like that's basically what you get in a 3-minute script. You know, and that script, and I think all the top 5 basically delivered on that very thing. That's you always have your basic setup. Again, I know there's the free falling one. The basic setup is you reverse back up, and that's your setup. Okay, fine. And then you build from there, and then you have the punchline at the very end. And pretty much all the scripts kind of worked to that. All the scripts that were the most effective that made it to the top 5 have that very characteristic as being the most effective, and I think that's all you can really sort of aim for.
Yeah, and I mean, let me just say, since you mentioned the top 5, like, you know, winning while being placed in a group with these other 4 great scripts is even greater. You know, once I read them, I was like, wow. And yeah, like I think all of those deserve to be made. Yeah. Probably like, you know, I mean, no pressure, you know.
Okay, but, yeah. No, but we are very actively trying to find placements for them, even if, you know, we ourselves as Centerframe can't make them. Yeah. You know, because we promised we'd make the winning one, but we want to help, you know, through our network and everything, find people who might, you know, and see if we can sort of pull that off. So yeah, so we're gonna find a desert. With a gas station somewhere. You know?
If anyone knows of a desert or a gas station, a desert with a gas station, call us, please.
Yeah, seriously. Like, we had some ideas. I mean, we're in Cyprus, so Israel is close. They've got deserts, they've got gas stations. You might even have 1 or 2 here, so we might have to look there. Might not look American, but I don't think it matters with the script. It feels Americana, but I think that's just the way you write.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah, and it's not that big of a talking cast. We could like take our cast anywhere and like make it work. Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole. I mean, this is the fun part now. Yeah. Right? Because it's like solving the problems and making it work. I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, congrats for winning. Congrats to all the other 5 contestants that basically participated. They were all good scripts. Really enjoyed them. We had over 100 people from the network voting on it, and Stavros came out on top. And again, congratulations on it. I'm glad we can do this in person, and not via Zoom or COVID regulations or anything like that. This is really nice, and a lovely little coincidence that we actually got to make this happen.
Fantastic.
So thanks to you guys for voting it that way, so I can come here and actually do this in person. This is a really cool thing. So well done.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I can't wait to share the film with everyone when it's done.
Yeah. Likewise. Thank you.
No worries.